Now, despite these international efforts to outline a code of ethics when it comes to human research experimentation, over the years, several classic cases came to light that clearly did not adhere to these codes. So I want to share with you some of these examples so that you can start to pick up on, oh, that's not appropriate, even when you're designing, or if you are designing your own experiments, or even if you're reading through other people's experiments, and you can sort of think about these ethical issues. So as we go through them, I'd like you to start thinking about which of these different codes that we've talked about are being breached. And then I'll cover it at the end after I've covered what the examples are. So keep thinking about which codes are these classic examples breaching. So let's start with the Tuskegee syphilis study that ran from 1932 to 1972. So in the US, the Public Health Service conducted a research project from 1932 to 1972 to document the natural progression of syphilis. So they used 600 low-income African American males, 399 of them out of the 600 who were infected with syphilis. So 201 were not infected with syphilis, and they recruited all these 600 low-income African American males to participate in this study. Participants were given free medical examinations. They were also given free meals and burial insurance. However, they were not told about their disease. The physicians who were conducting the study told the participants that they were being treated for bad blood. And I mean bad blood in quotation marks here. That's just the name they gave for syphilis. So the physicians deliberately denied these men any treatment for syphilis to see the natural progression of the disease. And they went even further than that and attempted to prevent them seeking treatment from other sources. So in May 1997, US President Bill Clinton apologized on behalf of the government to the surviving participants of the Tuskegee syphilis study and their family members, and the members of the Tuskegee syphilis study legacy committee that had been established. So these participants for this Tuskegee syphilis study were disadvantaged rural black men. However, the disease isn't confined to that population, yet they were the only ones that were studied. You see how then taking some people or one population for others to benefit from, that's a breach of that standard that we just talked about. Clearly also the risks to participants were not minimized. I mean, they weren't minimized at all. Instead, these participants actually had an increased risk of harm because they were not treated and they were even prevented from seeking treatment. So it's double whammy there as well. And this burden of risk was placed on these disadvantaged rural black male population, while a much broader population would be able to benefit from the findings. So that's not acceptable ethics standards. This study also clearly demonstrated the need for voluntary informed consent. That obviously didn't happen. The risks didn't outweigh the benefits, and the benefit and risks in research must be distributed fairly. I mean, you just can't do a study like this. But this study highlighted those breaches, and again, it points out why ethics issues need to be considered and why we need ethics committees. Another example, another sort of classic breach of these ethical standards is if we consider this Willowbrook school study that ran from 1963 to 1966, so just before the Declaration of Helsinki came into place. So we can also understand now why the Declaration of Helsinki came into place, because of these breaches that happened after the Nuremberg Code. So the Willowbrook State School, which is located in New York State, or was located in New York State, was an institution for mentally handicapped children. So parents of children in the institution, they gave consent for their children to participate in this particular study. However, I'll get back to that in a minute. So the intent of the research study was to follow the course of viral hepatitis. It's a bit similar to what they did with the syphilis study, but in this case they were looking at viral hepatitis. And they also wanted to look at the effectiveness of an agent for inoculating against hepatitis. So now I said that the parents provided consent, but the parents were provided with study information that described the drug administration as vaccinations. However, these children were actually deliberately infected with hepatitis virus to test these so-called vaccinations. So start thinking of the, risk-benefit ratio here, and it's kind of a little bit not quite right. So there's even evidence that the school only admitted children when the parents gave permission. So if parents had a mentally handicapped child and wanted the child to go to this school, they would only be allowed into this school if the parents signed the permission for them to be part of the study. So that's kind of not really what we mean with giving informed consent voluntarily. You shouldn't be disadvantaged if you don't want your child to be part of the study, whereas these parents would have been. Their children wouldn't be able to go to this school if they didn't give consent to participate in the study, and then of course they weren't properly informed. So this study highlights the need for proper and full informed consent. And obviously for the researchers to fully inform the volunteers about the study and what was going to be happening to them. And the whole risk-benefit ratio, it just didn't happen. Not only were they prevented from risk, they were actually literally infected with hepatitis virus to see the natural progression of that history of what happens with the hepatitis virus, but also to test their so-called vaccinations. It's just wrong on so many levels. So before I go on and give you a couple more examples of ethics breaches, test yourself on what we've covered so far just to make sure that you're picking up on these key concepts.